morning, Ankita.
Good morning.
Please sit down.
Thank you, sir.
Ankita Agarwal
Yes, sir.
from Kolkata.
Yes, sir.
Agarwal from Kolkata.
So my father migrated to Calcutta from Bihar after I was born.
All right. And are you a fresh? When did you do a graduation?
So I graduated in 2017.
2003 years back. And since then?
So for 1 year, I worked at Dalberg, which is a development consultancy firm. And then after working for 1 year, I quit in 2018 and I gave my exam. I prepared for 1 year and then I appeared for it in 2019.
And where do you live now?
Right now I'm living in Delhi. I've been living here since I entered college, but I'm moving back to Calcutta in a few days.
And your parents live in Calcutta?
Yes, sir.
And what was your core subject in honors?
Economics.
Economics?
Yes, sir.
Oh, wow. You didn't do your MA?
No, sir.
And your goal was? What did you, career goal?
So, sir, when I entered college, it wasn't very clear to me. I thought maybe I'll do a corporate sector job. But certain things happened to me in my final year of college, which is when I decided that I want to do something a little more meaningful with my life. I worked in the private sector for a year, which was a development sector job, to understand where is it in the development sector that I should go. And I realized that I will regret it if I don't try an attempt at the civil services. So.
You did economics honors from St. Stephen's
Yes.
College, and the ultimate course from the ultimate college. Are you proud of that?
Yes, sir.
You are, okay. But my understanding is that economics honors students from St. Stephen's more and more opting for the corporate sector and less to the civil services. Is that right? Is it still the trend?
So yes, as a trend, it's true that as a percentage, the number of students appearing for corporate jobs is more. And overall also, I think in Stephens, the pull of the civil services has reduced.
It has been low, and they do management and MBAs and that.
So my teachers tell me that this was more of the MBA trend was more true, say, 7 years ago. But now the corporate sector is not one monolith. So a lot of people like me, they go for development sector jobs rather than just corporate consultancy.
And your first choice is the IAS?
Yes, sir.
Second is IPS?
Yes, sir.
And suppose you get allocated to, let's say, Assam Kada.
That's okay.
That's okay?
Yes, sir.
All right? Okay. What's your first choice? State?
West Bengal.
West Bengal. Okay. Highly politicized civil services.
That's true, but politics is something that changes every 5 years, every 10 years. My parents will always live there. So.
And what does the father do?
My father's a businessman.
He's a businessman. Okay. All right. You told, tell us what is your hobby?
So I like to read in my free time. I used to play also, but
what did you play?
So I played basketball and ultimate frisbee, but I met with an accident in my final year. So since then, I didn't really have the time to re-pursue it.
Basketball you don't play now? You
No,
don't
sir.
know.
I haven't had the time or the space. There is no facility where I live to do that.
Do you enjoy the outdoors?
Yes, sir, I do.
You do?
Yes, sir.
Walking
Yes, sir.
and gardening?
So I've always lived in a city and I've never had...
Okay, right.
What is happening to the Indian economy at this stage? Why is it going down and down?
Sir, the Indian economy for the past 5-6 years, ever since we faced the taper tantrum and our fiscal deficit crisis, it saw a plummeting of private investment. But then we didn't feel it as much because of the reduction in oil prices, and our government expenses were able to tide through and consumption was still high. But finally we're feeling the brunt of that fall in private investment because now the government also does not have the fiscal space to invest. And since investment has been low for so many years and it's still low, so consumption will naturally take a hit. And the world environment has also not been great for trading. Agriculture prices have been, world agriculture prices have been falling. So essentially on all sides we're facing issues.
What about, you think Trump is visiting India? And what about the trade pact that is likely to come about or not likely to come about?
So,
What is it about?
so our trade issues? Or,
Yeah.
So one of the biggest issues that we're facing with America today is that the US does not believe that we deserve to be called a developing country. They don't want to give us the benefits of being a developing country. So they remove the generalized special preferences for us. And recently they took us out of the list, which would have made it, which now will make it easier for them to impose countervailing duties on our exports. So that is one big issue. The second is our IPR regulations are unsatisfactory for them. They feel that American companies are disadvantaged because of it. They also believe that our tariffs are much higher than they would like it to be. But sir, based on news reports, the expectations of a big trade deal are quite low because the USTR himself is not visiting. Perhaps there will be a small trade deal, but doesn't look very positive.
I just read a few days back that Bangladesh's economy is growing much faster than India. Why are we lagging behind and why is Bangladesh moving so fast? What's happening?
So,
And what can we learn from Bangladesh,
yes, sir.
if anything?
So there are two aspects to this that I can think of right now. One is Bangladesh has investment in its social sector it has been quite ahead of us in terms of investing in women's health, education. Their fertility rates are quite low. Then things like open defecation, they stopped it much before we could. So in those terms, Bangladesh has been investing ever since its birth. And ultimately, these things pay off, right? So that is one thing that is happening. The second thing, sir, my understanding is that their labor laws are a lot more liberal than ours. So the ready-made garment industry in Bangladesh is thriving. Sir, I've worked in Bangladesh when I was at Dalberg, and I saw it myself that hordes and hordes of women working in the ready-made garment sector because of their liberalized labor laws. So those are the two things that I can think of currently that works for them.
How can we learn from them?
So one is our labor laws are much more complicated and steps are being taken in that regard. So these things will take time to sort of show their fruit. Second thing is, we really need to step up our investment in health education because still the general population is not well educated, well cared for. We will not have a labor force to employ. So that is something we can learn from them.
Tell us something about Skills India program.
So Skills India is the flagship skilling program of the union government. It focuses on both skills and entrepreneurship amongst the young, and there are various models that are subsumed under Skill India. One of them being the apprenticeship model, where the government subsidizes skilling programs that the industry themselves take on. Second thing is the government directly skills.
What is the method of implementation?
Of the apprenticeship program?
Of the scheme as such.
So we have the National Skill Development Corporation. That is a public-private partnership. Under that we have the Sector Skill Council, which is also run by the private sector. So, the investment comes in both from the government and the private sector, and it is channeled to various skilling programs. That's as much as I know.
Tell me about 2 laws recently passed which empower women, and what are the highlights of those laws?
Yes, so one was the Triple Talaq, the act. which sort of protects Muslim women from being divorced by their husbands instantaneously. Another act passed by the parliament. Can I take a minute?
Sure.
to think?
Sure.
So I can't think of any act. I can think of a few bills that have entered the parliament.
No, but so many acts have also been passed recently. Last decade, I'm using.
Okay, last decade. Okay. So there was an act which criminalized domestic violence. The amendments to the criminal law, which essentially which would treat juveniles above 16 years of age will be tried as adults in case of sexual abuse leading to death or vegetative state. So then,
That's good enough. Basically, I'd asked about empowering women, so there's no need to give juvenile justice because that is not just women, that is for both, isn't it? Okay, what is your view about lateral entry in the IAS and what has the government done regarding that?
so I think lateral entry the idea is positive. The step is positive. It needs to be. So there needs to be a proper policy in place as to how lateral entry will happen. I think that becomes the bigger contention when talking about lateral entry rather than just the idea. I agree with the idea that we need more subject experts in the government, but to ensure impartiality, to ensure depoliticization and no nepotism, there needs to be a proper spelt out policy as to it. It should not be ad hoc. It does not look. It does not reflect
What has
impartiality.
the government done, the present government, with regard to lateral entry?
So yes, sir. So as far as I know, a few posts were opened up and advertised.
How many and which departments? Any idea?
So I won't know the exact number.
Okay, no problem. Lastly, tell me about child rights and the law which safeguards children.
So the premier law that
Let's
safeguards.
start with child rights. What are the rights of children?
So if we start with the fundamental rights, then Article 21A gives the right to education to all children below the age of 14, from 5 to 14 years of age.
5 to 14?
6.
Are you sure?
It's either 5 or 6.
Okay, fine. It's 6.
It's 6, yes. Then, sir, the fundamental right of protection against trafficking is something that impacts children positively, and the prevention of child labour.
From where these rights derived? From where they derived? Internationally, from where do they flow?
So there's a convention on child rights from which they flow.
Okay, and what is the law?
The Juvenile Justice Act.
Apart from that, a recent law which has been enacted?
So the prevention of crime, POXO.
Yeah, it is POXO is right, but is it prevention?
Protection of Children Against Sexual Offences Act.
Can you give me a couple of highlights of POXO?
Yes, sir. So the POXO, for children who are below 12 years of age who are sexually abused, it allows for death penalty of the perpetrator of the crime. Other than that, it provides for a child-friendly criminal justice process when the victim is a victim of sexual abuse. It details exactly what is sexual abuse of a child, how is it.
Okay, good, thank you.
Post Second World War, the world was divided into two blocks, the communist bloc and the non-communist bloc. Why of late there's a drift away from communist ideology as such? Why is communism now becoming it's fading away gradually? What are the reasons, would you think?
Um, so two aspects to this. One is communism, the way it was propounded by Karl Marx. Like all ideologies, it was adopted by men, but distorted. It was essentially used to establish power. Power became the ideology and not communism. So the way it was adopted, it was delegitimized by what happened in USSR, the way USSR held on to power, and the way Russia functions now. So that is one reason. The second is it can be debated whether or not communism is fading, given that China, which calls itself a communist country, is being seen as a model by a lot of developing countries, a model to emulate. But again, if that is communism, is also something that is being debated.
Good.
So now coming to another area of discussion, would you think India would be more successful, happier in having a presidential form of government?
No, sir.
How? Why? Would you elaborate?
So, one is the reason parliamentary system would work better. Two things. One is we're an extremely diverse society, and while we might see centralizing trends, some years here and there, the general trend has been towards greater regional identity, greater decentralization. So a parliamentary system allows those aspirations to exist, doesn't throttle those aspirations. So it's better for harmonious political relations in our country. Second, there is harmony between the legislature and the executive. And while it's true that the executive might be becoming stronger, but then we should look at improving the parliamentary system and not giving in to centralizing trends.
How would you go about improving the parliamentary system? You just talked about it. What
Yes.
improvements are required? What are the deficiencies right now?
So one is the anti-defection law in its current form. We need that law, but I feel it should not be applicable to all bills and all votes that the parliamentarians make. It can be limited to, say, the no confidence motions or the budget, things that on which the survival of the government depends. So the second thing is the committee system. There should be a little more investment into research and resources that the parliamentarians have, their tenure in the committees, so that they can contribute more. So the third thing is we need to think beyond the first past the post system. We need to think of proportional representation. We need to make sure that our democracy becomes more representative.
More representative,
Yes.
right.
Those are the three things I can...
What about criminals in our legislatures? People with criminal records. Unless you are convicted, you go up in appeal, you're not convicted. So you have people who have committed dacoities and murders sitting in legislatures.
Yes, sir. So there are two aspects to solve this. One is, as I think former election commissioner Mr. S.Y. Qureshi had mentioned, that we can prevent politicians who have serious criminal accusations against them, charge-sheeted, and the charge sheet should have been made 6 months in advance to the notification of the election. Such candidates can be debarred. So the second thing is...
But are they being debarred?
No, sir, not yet. But
So
sir,
we're talking.
so that's why I come to the second...
It's a suggestion.
No, it's her suggestion, but my point is,
Yes, sir.
the fact remains, it suits
Yes, sir.
the political parties
So-
not to become very vigorous in its implementation.
So there's... Yes,
All
sir.
parties
Yes, sir.
have people with criminal records contesting elections.
Yes.
But that's an area, do you think it needs to be corrected?
Yes, so the problem is there's a demand for criminals in our... so as Milind Vaishnav has documented, there are a lot of people... So at the end, even if parties do give them tickets, it's people like us who vote for them. So it's what he has documented is
So you're
that
blaming the people.
politics, so democracy stands on the shoulder of the
Okay,
people.
all right, okay. ठीक है.
Well, Ankita, tell me, who lives if India dies and who dies if India lives?
So India is nothing but its people.
Pardon?
So India is nothing if not its people. The Indians are India and India is Indians. So if India dies, so that is if different the entire diverse population does not recognize as Indians anymore, then what we will look at is perhaps a state of anarchy in
Indians means you mean to say Indian culture, Indian philosophy and Indian customs and traditions. Right? No.
So by India, I mean people identifying themselves as India. It's very hard to say what is Indian and what is not. Our culture, our customs, our history is extremely diverse, extremely contested even. So labeling anything as India is probably will exclude a lot of people who believe they're Indians, believe that they're India. But so.
Okay. My second question, it's a very vultures are coming. Vultures are coming in the Indian context you speak it, and that too in the present context of the world. To be more precise, Islamic threat to Indian nationalism.
Yeah, okay. So the biggest, one of the biggest threats to the Indian nation is Pakistan's foreign policy of using terror, non-conventional force against us, because it will be very difficult for them to win a conventional war against us. So this is their state policy, and this policy, it's given an impetus by external factors, that is Western nations who need Pakistan for their foreign policy in, say, Afghanistan. So that is one aspect. And that is something we've been working towards diplomatically, to isolate Pakistan, to bring them to account for their foreign policy against India. So the second thing is, the reason why Pakistan's policy might win in India is internal factors, is if so we're a diverse nation and there
Ankita, you seem to mislead the board, I have asked about the Islamic threat. Pakistan is nothing. Pakistan is very meager, It consists only 20 crores population. I mean, our UP population is more around 20 crores, right? So I'm asking not about Pakistan, but about Islamic threat to Indian nationalism. Islamic threat consists IAS also, and everything. I mean, that Islam as a whole is threatening on our culture.
So I think saying that Islam as a whole is threatening our culture is slightly misleading, because like any other ideology, the religion of Islam has also been misused by people who found it expedient to do it, to sort of rise up against other religions, other nations. So it's a contest of ideas. If they can propagate a certain nature of Islam, then we can also propagate a certain version of Islam amongst our population, amongst people who we consider as Indians. So it's there is a threat, but that threat can only be countered internally with ideas.
Okay, my last question is, what is Jambu Dweep? The concept of Jambu Dweep.
So, sir, in ancient Indian thought, the world is seen as consisting of many dweeps, one of which is Jambu Dweep, on which
many dweeps, and in those dweeps, one was Jambu Dweep.
So that's what I.
No. If you are not aware of any answer, then you just say, sir, I am not aware of it. Okay.